And a lot of times the vendors will say, hey, you know what, that sounds great. We can do it. We can write some code. And now you're spending all this money on customization. Are there various gaps that are happening because I'm waiting on something from another department, but that's not necessarily put into the process saying there's a handoff. So a good example could be on accounts payable. I'm not going to pay an invoice until I know it's actually been received. Hey, I'm Christy Barber. I am a financial tech specialist, kind of the guru when it comes to all things tech and accounting. Today, I want to dive into accounting processes and why processes are so important. And when they're left out, all the things that can happen in the meantime. And I think it's very critical to understand that even though accounting seems straightforward, there are critical processes that have to be put into place to make this department successful. The biggest red flag I see when working with clients is a lack of just understanding in general of a process. How many say, yeah, we have process, we don't really follow them? How many say, hey, we don't need a process, it's straightforward enough that our people know? And how this kind of creates problems later on in the future. So, if you're looking to implement a new software solution, if you don't have any processes in place, you don't know where you need to go specifically, so that when looking at a new software solution, you can't tell them what you specifically need it to do. You can speak to some of it, but if you don't have the right workflow of processes to determine where your department needs to be able to hand things off, then you're not going to be able to know when selecting a solution how all the other areas of the company come into play. So when it comes to processes, it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole and know what do I need, or overcomplicating and overthinking of it. But to bring it up a couple levels and to stay simple is, think about when you're designing a house or a building. You have a blueprint. If you don't have a blueprint, you don't know what you're supposed to build. You don't know where the walls are going to be. You don't know what doors flow here and there. And so processes are very similar to that, of knowing how to build them and how all of the data points travel in and throughout that, to know how the data points will flow to be able to get you the results that you need to be able to understand how your accounting department works. So what happens when you don't look at processes? I kind of don't want to be the doomsday that's like, oh no, if you don't do this, you might as well shut the door on your business. I'm not talking about that. But I'm trying to look at a high level how not having processes can affect your business. One of the main things is, if you're going to implement software, if you don't have a high level understanding of what your processes are, that implementation can fail. You can end up highly customizing things when you don't need to, because you're thinking, hey, I probably should do things this way. Maybe I shouldn't. And a lot of times the vendors will say, hey, you know what, that sounds great. We can do it. We can write some code. And now you're spending all this money on customizations. It can also lead to excess costs and ways that you're not necessarily utilizing your people to generate more revenue. Good example could be, if you have a process in place and currently you have 3 or 4 people that touch that process, and really it needs to be 1, maybe 2 persons and a piece of technology, you can now free up those people to be utilized in other ways to add additional value to the company, and they're not being bogged down by an old process that is irrelevant to what you're doing today. So I want to talk about accounting specifically, how these processes are so important for tracking what money's coming in, what money's come out. Because at the end of the day, it is all about money in the accounting department. You don't want to pay unnecessary money to audits if things are done wrong, or double paying vendors and air. You also want to make sure that you're not overlooking money that's coming in and now it's affecting the overall cash flow of the company. So let's start with the accounting cycle. How important is it to have clear processes from when we're recording, we're organizing, we're posting, we're finishing our reports, and then closing out month end, quarter end, and year end? How does that come into place with your department? And how do you have these processes set up so that you know you're not missing anything? And that's where financial health assessment can come into place, to really evaluate what your true processes look like, what's being missed, and what things can help guarantee that you are closing at a faster time, that you are making sure that your money is coming in, you're paying your bills on time, nothing's getting lost in those kind of the holes of the gaps, which might happen when you don't have processes in place. An easy way to start evaluating what processes you have in place is take some post-it notes, stick them on a wall, or go to a whiteboard and start writing through, hey, this is what our process is today of how accounts payable works. And you write that in a high level. And then you go back through and start putting in those more refined details of that specific process. You're identifying in that time, do I have too many people working on this one process? Do I not have enough people working on it? Are there various gaps that are happening because I'm waiting on something from another department, but that's not necessarily put into the process saying there's a handoff. So a good example could be on accounts payable. I'm not going to pay an invoice until I know it's actually been received. But if my receiving department somehow doesn't have a clear process to be able to tell the accounts payable department, hey, we received these goods, here's the packing slip, here's any other documentation that you need to be able to match it to the purchase order or the invoice that has already come in to be able to pay it. And so there's a lot of intricate details that happen when you really look at your accounting processes. Now that you have a good understanding of what your current state is of your accounting department and those processes, you can now move into, hey, what do we want the future state to look like? And this is where it's really important to bring in an independent type consultant. We're not looking for your vendor to give you this information. We're not looking for your system integrator or your neighbor to give you this information. You need somebody that understands the SMB world and how these goals that you're looking to achieve can be had. And this is where you can also look at, or somebody can come in with an unbiased opinion and look at the processes that you have and help align those with the goals that you want your company to follow, and also the type of technology that can work well with those overall goals.